in health, there's so many health impacts that are indicators for stress and burnout. For me, psoriasis was a big one. For some of my clients, it's eczema, it's hair loss, it's trouble sleeping, it's weight gain, it's weight loss, right? So this is why I say it's a spectrum, but it's good to kind of check in, like how many of these things being mentioned do I resonate with? Or is there something along the lines I resonate with? Those could be indicators that you're experiencing burnout or you're on some form of the spectrum of burnout.
Hey friends, welcome to Public Health Careers. I'm Omari Richens, founder of the Public Health Millennial and host of Public Health Careers. Join us as we dive deep into public health topics and career journeys. You'll hear diverse career stories, absorb professional development and career strategies to help you learn, navigate, and transform your public health journey. On today's episode, we have longtime friend of the podcast, Marissa McKool. Marissa is the public health burnout coach. She's a former public health leader turned coach that helps you lose the stress and reclaim your life. She specifically works to empower women in public health to break free from burnout. Today, she shares practical strategies to prevent burnout and reclaim balance in your life. You'll hear and learn more about Marissa coaching me on burnout around the Public Health Millennial Instagram page, how burnout is a spectrum and it can show up in many different ways, why we in public health need tools and skills to deal with burnout, why we have to proactively shift our focus on what we have control over and take ownership of it, the benefit of tactically scheduling rest into your calendar, and why where your goal is directed, your brain energy is focused, and much, much more. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and enjoy today's episode.
Hey, it's Marissa McKool, the Public Health Burnout Coach, and you're listening to the Public Health Careers Podcast.
Welcome to the show, Marissa. Well, welcome again, I should say.
Thanks for having me back. I feel so honored to be able to come back and chat with you so much.
Yeah, I love it as well. I felt like it's been too long, so I was like, hey, let's get on a call with Marissa. Let's hear what she's been up to. You know, the state of public health is crazy, so like this is the perfect time.
It's true. And my work and what I do has evolved so much since the first time I was on the show, like night and day. So I'm excited to share kind of the burnout stuff I'm doing and how it can help all of you listening.
Absolutely. And before we get into any of that, can you tell us how do you identify and a little about your personal background?
Sure. So I'm Marissa McKool. I use she, her pronouns. I am passionate about public health. I grew up in a what you might call working class, blue collar family. I'm white, American, Lebanese, Arab, whatever you want to call it. And what was the last part I was supposed to say? Anything else?
Just a little bit about yourself. Who are you outside of public health? What do you like
Okay.
outside of public health?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think so many of us in public health identify so strongly with it. It's sometimes hard to separate, right? Because we're so passionate about it and the work that we do. But outside of public health, I think I'm someone who wants to live a life where I feel fulfilled and I'm really happy and get to be in nature and get to do things that bring me joy, like traveling and reading books and cooking great food. And I think all those things are possible even when you work in public health with all the stressors we're facing. And so I'm excited to be here and chat about that today.
Love that. And I think like building that intentional vision for a life for yourself is so important. And one of the ways that you can like actively work to combat burnout. But we will get more into that. Marissa and I have spoken, I think this is the third time, as we were saying. This might be the most that someone has been on Public Health Career. So shout out to you for that. Yeah, it's awesome to have you back. And, you know, we spoke maybe a couple years ago and the state of public health and burnout was bad then. And now coming into 2025 with everything that's been happening, political landscape, jobs, everyone is worried. So I think like this is the best time to kind of talk about what's going on. How can people deal with burnout? How can people really like have strategies to become resilient throughout these times and push forward doing this work?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I hit burnout, even though I didn't know that's what it was called, way back in 2017. And then I started coaching other people in public health on burnout when the pandemic hit in 2020. And I joined, I think, your podcast for the first time in 2021. And now here we are. And burnout is not only still an issue, but it's intensifying quite a bit with everything happening in the field in 2025.
Absolutely. So if you're listening right now, like maybe get a book, get your notebook ready, take some notes, because there's going to be an action-packed session with tips that you can take away to really like move forward and be comfortable and know what strategies you can use so you aren't burning out and doing too much, maybe. But maybe that's the wrong phrasing. Marissa will correct me. uh, so Marissa, you have worked with many clients around burnout. What does burnout look like in public health professionals?
Yeah. So I always like to say burnout is a spectrum, and it shows up in a variety of ways. And part of the reason I think it's really important to name that is it's very easy, especially now, for us to use the 2020 as a reference point of what burnout looks like. Right. So some people I work with, they're like, well, it's not 2020. I'm not doing Zoom school. I'm not working 90 hours a week. I'm not getting death threats from the public. That doesn't mean you're not experiencing burnout. So I always like to make it very, very clear that there's quite a spectrum. And actually, in my program, when people join, they take a 16-question assessment across factors from how much rest you're getting, the impact of work stress, how much work stress you're experiencing, and a number of other factors to see where they fall across that spectrum. However, with that said, I do find you can look for some themes across different areas of your life. So in your job, in your day-to-day, sometimes what burnout can look like is feeling apathetic, feeling numb, feeling detached, or quite the opposite. And that was me when I was burnt out. I was feeling really resentful, really frustrated, really angry. Those things can be signs of burnout. It can look like making mistakes or dropping the ball at work where normally maybe you're on top of it. It can also have impacts outside of work. So this can look like bringing stress home, where you are short and reactive to those around you, where you don't have any patience. You go from 0 to 100. You have disproportionate emotional reactions to small things. So for me, one of the indicators that I look back and now see is on a Sunday, I had gotten an email notification on my phone from work. It wasn't urgent. I wasn't in trouble, but I just started crying just from the sheer exhaustion, right? There's nothing wrong with crying, but that was a disproportionate emotional reaction to getting a non-urgent email. So things like that can be indicators. You can also look at your health and your relationships to see potentially if you're experiencing burnout by the outcomes that you're having. So in relationships, it can look like creating a lot of strain and having a lot more conflict in your relationships, whether your partner or your parenting or anything like that. It can also look like the opposite. So you're withdrawn more, you're more distant because you don't have the energy to spend with them. In health, there's so many health impacts that are indicators for stress and burnout. For me, psoriasis was a big one. For some of my clients, it's eczema, it's hair loss, it's trouble sleeping, it's weight gain, it's weight loss, right? So this is why I say it's a spectrum, but it's good to kind of check in, like how many of these things being mentioned do I resonate with? Or is there something along the lines I resonate with? Those could be indicators that you're experiencing burnout or you're on some form of the spectrum of burnout.
I appreciate you sharing that as a spectrum, because I think people think it's like it's either on or it's off. It's like I'm burnt out or I'm not burnt out. But considering everything you said just now, considering you have this 16-question survey that really digs deep into these different factors in your life, to consider that there are many like factors that contribute to burnout, and then depending on who you are, it can show up in different ways. And I think that that's important, because maybe too often we think it's this one way. It's like maybe you shut down and you think, oh, that's burnout when you're having like panic attacks. But there are other ways that it shows up, like you were explaining in the relationships, or having a disproportionate reaction to something that didn't really um, need that reaction. So maybe the next question is, when when do you like advise someone on that scale or spectrum of burnout to maybe get help or get support, or what are the things that you're coaching people around?
I would say it is never too early to get support with stress and burnout. And what I have found, I have never had someone come to me where I say, oh, it's too early to think about this, right? Because the truth is, if you're not experiencing stress, then you probably didn't click on this episode, right? Then you're probably not coming to my webinar. So if you are listening to this, if you are coming to any of my webinars or free resources on this, then that already is telling you something that you could use some support. But even with that said, Burnout is something not only we need to get out of, but we need to actively prevent from coming back. So that's why it's so important to learn the skills of getting out of burnout and preventing it, because it's not just a one and done of like, oh, I'm no longer burnt out. Because the system, the world that we live in is constantly promoting hustle culture, overworking, burning out, not resting, putting ourselves last. So we get all these messages outside of us at work, in the media, even what's going on politically, that's really trying to get us to overwork and burn ourselves out and exhaust ourselves. So even if you get out of burnout, if you did not learn the skills and the tools to prevent it from coming back, given the society we live in and the state of the public health workforce, it is very, very likely it will come back at some point. That's why there's a lot of people actually who I work with who've quit their job thinking that was going to be the solution, get a new job, and maybe they have a great boss. Maybe the new job actually has better flexible hours. They're still stressed and they're still burnt out and they come to work with me. And that's because there are still other stressors and challenges and factors at play, even if you have a great workplace. And you have to have the skills to make sure those challenges, those stressors don't turn out to create burnout for yourself.
Thank you for sharing that. And knowing that they're like skills and tools and techniques that like we all can gain to really approach burnout and I also appreciate you sharing that like you have to be proactive and like in public health, like preventative in
Mm-hmm.
focusing on like how can we do all the things now so that we don't get to that like level 2 or 3 that might require even a higher level of like coaching or support, but how can we have those skills and tools to ensure that we're staying in that maybe level 1 where we're not like we're tired but we're not burning out per se, is so important. And this question might be a little tougher because it's not working one on one with people, but understanding that, yes, we need skills and tools in our pockets to be able to deal with burnout. But then there are these contributing factors that are sometimes outside of our control, systemic issues, inadequate support, escalating workloads, higher demands, like hustle culture, as you're saying. How do you talk to someone that is maybe saying that I don't have control of the things so that I can't burn out? Like right now, everything is exploding, everything is an emergency, and there's nothing that I can do. And if I take a step back, like things are gonna get like fall off the plate and just missed. So like how do you talk to that person?
Yeah, so I think it's important to understand there are two kind of categories that contribute to burnout: external factors that contribute to burnout and internal factors. So what you're describing is a lot of the external factors, right? Whether it's policy shifts, the lack of funding, less team members because there's layoffs. Those are things happening externally that create challenges that make it more likely we will burn out. And we are not denying that those challenges exist, nor that they make things hard for us. However, we do not have full control over those challenges. Like if I could just tell you how to change those challenges, I would. But that's just not the nature of life. Even outside of public health, there's always going to be external challenges that we cannot change. Things other people do or say that impact us. The way in which policies or systems are put in place that might impact us. Can we work towards changing those? Yes, of course. But because we're in public health, we know that systems change takes a long time. And if we're stressed, if we're overwhelmed and we're burnt out, we don't have that time to wait. The good news is the other factor that contributes to burnout is the internal factors, which is the things we are doing. Now, sometimes when people hear that, they feel kind of on the defense, like, whoa, 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 you're blaming me. No, it's not about blame. It's where do you have control and agency and power, right? So when you are faced with an external challenge, how you show up to that challenge determines how stressed and overwhelmed and anxious you're going to be. You can either make your stress and anxiety worse, or you can manage it and make it minimal, right? So when we're facing a challenge, what are you thinking about this challenge? Are you thinking, oh, this is impossible. There's nothing I can do. It's all out of my hands. That is so disempowering. And that just shuts you down from being creative, from problem solving, from reaching out for support, versus facing a challenge and really believing This is temporary. I can figure this out. I can overcome this. I don't have to let this take me out, which is so much more empowering, grounds you, keeps you more calm, helps you problem solve, helps you think creatively, helps you think rationally instead of making impulsive decisions. That's why this piece is so important, because we cannot wait for all these systems and policies and things outside of us to change to feel better. We don't have the time for that, but also we don't have to necessarily. We can learn how to respond to those challenges in a way where we're not overworking ourselves, where we're not putting more pressure on ourselves, where we're not holding ourselves back. And that's where we have agency and control and power. It's not about denying the impacts of the external things. It's about redirecting where we have control to change how we're experiencing those challenges.
That's so important because like where you focus is kind of where your energy goes. And many times we do focus so much on the external and all the things that are happening to us, and many times we have no way to change those things. But to your point, we have the ability and agency to build the power to say, okay, we can't change those things, but how can we do things internally until deal with the internal factors around our burnout to ensure that we are resilient and whole. Because regardless of it, there is going to be some sort of negative systemic thing that is going on that's going to make this tough. Like the external factors are never going to not be there. So it's really ensuring that we have the skills and the tools to be able to fight burnout throughout that process, and really be able to focus on it from that internal perspective.
Yeah, and think about this, right? When we are facing external challenges from the place of there's nothing I can do, I have no control, it's impossible. What happens is we get shut down, and then we don't direct our energy to advocating, pushing back, making changes, creating strong relationships, networking, being strategic, right? And that's exactly what hustle culture and white supremacy and the patriarchy wants, is for us to get so shut down, so hopeless, so defeated that we don't use our intellect, our energy, our problem solving skills to change the system. However, if we shift in response to challenges to focusing on where we do have control, then actually those systems don't win, because we're focusing our energy on what we can do, how we want to show up, the decisions we want to make that keep us moving forward to then make the changes to the systems at play. So we have to really think about it a little bit more zoomed out of who really benefits if we just believe it's out of our control, there's nothing we can do. It's not us, it's the systems of oppression. It's the systems that create inequity that really benefit from that belief.
Absolutely. And before we get into some tips to get started in thinking about how you can battle your burnout, I would love, well, I hope that you're listening. I've listened to the other episode with Marissa, but if you have not, I would love for you to share more about your experience with burnout, work in public health, and then leading you to founding the public health coach and becoming the public health burnout coach.
Yeah. And I'm not actually sure how much of the story I told when I first came on, because when I first started coaching, it wasn't so specific to burnout necessarily. That's really evolved. However, my first experience receiving coaching was when I was burnt out. So I've spent my whole career in public health. I got my undergrad degree in public health, which I think is more common now than it was when I was an undergrad. I got my graduate degree at Emory, went on to the CDC working in the Division of Violence Prevention. Actually, when Trump was first elected, as you could imagine, I was experiencing a lot of what people are experiencing now, working in sexual violence prevention. Funding was being taken away. We were told we weren't allowed to say certain things. I was looking for a new job. Any job in that kind of part of the sector wasn't hiring because of everything happening. And I also at that time had a family emergency where my mom became really ill and I moved home to take care of her. I also went through a breakup. So what I have found now that I've worked in the burnout coaching is that typically what happens when we're experiencing burnout, there's multiple stressors at bay. Sometimes it's just work, but I don't find that to be often the case. Usually there's the stress at work, the stress at home, the stress in your health, something else. And looking back, I can see that was my experience. I had all these stressors, and I got a new job at UC Berkeley School of Public Health. And this was right after they had a bunch of layoffs. And so the existing staff were really burnt out, really unhappy. And I came into a role that at one point was 3 different people squished into one. And between all of that, I didn't realize it, but I started entering into burnout. What I knew at the time is I was unhappy. I was miserable. I thought it was all my leadership's fault and they weren't doing anything about it. And I thought I was basically SOL. And what I learned through kind of really, no one was talking about burnout. There was no burnout coach in public health. And what I learned through just my own basically inner not giving upness, I was like, I love public health, but I'm not going out this way. Like, there's got to be a way to fix this. And I've tried all the things, all the experts tell you, exercise, sleep, all that, and it wasn't helping. I even went to therapy. That helped some, but it didn't change it. I ended up hiring a coach who actually worked with lawyers who were stressed out. And what she taught me changed my whole life. It wasn't about getting my boss or leadership to change. It wasn't about quitting and getting a new job. It was about exactly what we've been talking about, focusing on where you have control and taking full responsibility and ownership there and making different decisions. Where am I denying myself rest? Well, for me, I was eating through my lunch. I mean, I was working through my lunch, right? My stomach would be growling and I would be like, I don't have time to stop. Or I'd eat it slowly, like one bite at a time over 3 hours and it'd get cold. Where are you denying yourself the rest your mind and body needs? I wasn't working out. I was choosing to work late. I was choosing to work on weekends. I didn't have any boundaries set around my emails or the expectations for my team. There are so many areas that she helped me realize I was really not taking responsibility for where I was contributing to my own level of stress and burnout. And through the skills and tools she taught me, it totally changed my life without having to quit my job, without getting more staff hired, without my leadership changing. And I was able to leave work by 3:30 every single day. I was finally so much happier. I got all my work done. Nothing was falling through the cracks. I wasn't working late. I had time to start taking Arabic lessons, time to start dating and being enjoyable to be around on dates because I was finally happy. I was working out multiple times a week. I was volunteering at an animal shelter. Like, everything in my life changed for the better. And what ended up happening was so many people stopped me and asked me what I was doing differently. Like, it was noticeable. And I find this a lot when I work with folks. They are so scared if they start setting boundaries and saying no and prioritizing themselves that they're going to drop the ball, that people are going to think they're lazy or that they don't care, or they'll be upset at them. I have found more often than not, what happens is people admire you and they want to learn from you. Because when you learn the tools of getting out of burnout, you essentially learn how to become a master at time management, at efficiency, at effectiveness, and at productivity. And everyone wants that. Everyone wants to learn from that. That is well respected. And everyone wants work-life balance. So when you are creating that, people actually want to learn from you. I remember this researcher, she had been there like 20 years. She was one of the researchers who had her own office. I was in the open cubicle, so you can tell the hierarchy difference there. And she stopped me in the hall and was like, how are you doing this? I'm struggling. Can you help me? And I went into her office and we talked about it. And that's when I really realized, like, this is so needed. When I first got into coaching, I was coaching a little bit more early career professionals because in my mind, right, let's go upstream. Let's get these tools to folks who are just new to the career. And then COVID hit. And the burnout just got worse and worse and worse. And what I realized was really the need was people in stress and burnout, that particular niche, because we still are losing staff left and right to burnout and stress. And we're not going to be able to do the work we need to do without the workforce. So that's really where I pivoted to focus much more on those, for individuals who are overwhelmed, who are stressed, who don't have work-life balance, whose health is being impacted, whose family relationships are being impacted, helping them eliminate that so they continue the work in the field, feeling fulfilled, being able to sustain their work and have an impact. So that's basically my story of how I've gotten to the place that I am at now.
Wow. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that story. I think it definitely does illuminate a lot of what others might be going through right now and highlighting why it's just so important to focus on where we have control and like even deeper than that, the ownership that we have and responsibility, because oftentimes we might watch Netflix for 2 hours and not like not prioritize something that might give us more rejuvenation, and just like understanding that many of the things that are happening, we do have power to change how they impact us and how important that is. I wanted to ask, so what was the point that got you to say, or maybe the better question is, so you said that you were experiencing different feelings. You weren't sure what those feelings were. You were getting advice around, like, exercise, sleep, therapy, which helped to some extent. But then it was really the coaching that got you to this point to build the skills, tools, and understanding to really be resilient and have the power to take agency. What got you to that point of coaching? And yeah.
I think for me, everyone's different, right? But I've kind of always had the personality, for better or for worse, that if I want something, I make it happen. And I knew I wanted to stay in public health, but not at the experience I was having where I was exhausted. So I was just willing to try almost anything. Now, I will tell you, when I first started working with my coach and she pointed out, like, hey, you're creating a lot of this, not all of it, but a lot of it yourself. I was resistant as heck. I did not like hearing that, right? But the biggest thing that changed, which now I, teach other women, is understanding our brains, right? That was the biggest difference I didn't get from, it's true, exercise does help with your stress. That is a fact. However, if you don't have time in your schedule to exercise, that advice does not help you, right? It is true, therapy can be helpful in the sense of like processing emotions or processing past trauma, big T or little t you've experienced. However, that doesn't necessarily help you change how you face future challenges, right? So the missing piece for me that I realized through coaching and that now I help other people with is understanding the neuroscience of our brain. Why is it we are skipping lunch and not nourishing our body? It's not just because we want to work harder. It's because we have been socialized to believe in order to rest, you have to earn it. We've been taught that through so many messages. And so once you understand that, you understand what's happening in your brain is your brain has basically, imagine your brain is like a computer that runs SAS. Your brain has been given all this SAS code that says you can't rest until you get it all done. You can't put yourself first. It's selfish. You have to put yourself last. Now, obviously, your brain doesn't say it in those sentences, but just imagine that's what we've been told from the world around us. And your brain is running that code unconsciously. And that's driving a lot of your decisions and a lot of your actions. Learning that, understanding how that works and how to undo that changes everything. It gives you so much more control because you have a lot more control over your brain. Similarly, with understanding how our brains have evolved from an evolutionary point of view. So I see this a lot right now in the context of public health in 2025. A lot of doom scrolling, right? A lot of news addiction. And when we do that, not only does it increase our anxiety and our worry, but we're not getting our work done and we're falling further behind. Now, you could tell someone like, hey, just don't do that. Put your phone on silent, put it in the other room. That often does not work. Why? Because our brains have a negativity bias. We have developed over hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years, where our brain has basically learned the best way to stay alive is to keep a lookout for the things that might kill us, right? That's why your brain wants to keep checking the news. When you understand that, then you can learn how to address that. How do I address that negativity bias in my brain so I don't have that urge to check the news? Right? Those were all the missing pieces that I did not have from just exercising, from talking to HR, from going to therapy. And learning those things gives you so much control and agency because so much of the decisions and actions we are taking are unconscious. It's just our brain operating for us in the way in which the world has told us to, that oftentimes isn't that helpful. It doesn't serve us. So learning how to change that really allows you to be in the driver's seat.
That was amazing. That was amazing. And I guess, like, going to the next steps of this, what are some tips that you would give people, or actionable strategies to get started in dealing with their burnout, and maybe even like starting with like assessing themselves? So
Yeah. So there's a couple different things I'll say to get started. And I always like to be very clear. Eliminating burnout and learning the tools and skills to prevent it from coming back does not happen in one podcast episode. Like, I work with people for 6 months to do this work, right? So I always like to make that very, very clear. I think in America, especially, we want that like quick fix and just take a pill. That's not the way this works. So here are some places for those of you listening, you can get started. And then I have a resource I can share, and I'll send you the link so you can put it in the show notes for folks. One thing I want folks listening to start noticing is, how often a day are you saying I have to or I can't? Just notice that. I have to finish this report. I can't go to the gym. I have to keep working. I can't make it to that birthday party, whatever it is, right? That seems so inconsequential, but that's an example of your brain just running that SAS code that it's been taught, saying, I can't prioritize me. I have to overwork. That's essentially what your brain is doing. Now, it's not doing that to be malicious, okay? It's just been taught to do that. So I want you to first notice that. The second thing I want you to do when you notice that is to shift and intentionally remind yourself, I am choosing to, or I am choosing not to, right? Because when you shift that, what you are doing is you're owning your decision-making power. You are owning the fact that you have ability to make a different decision. So even if you say, I'm choosing to work through lunch, I would much rather you say that and still make that choice than say, I have to work through lunch. Because that I have to basically leaves you believing you are powerless. You are not. Changing it to I am choosing to, or I'm choosing not to, gives you the opportunity to change your choice. So that is one example of how you can start working with your brain to shift your brain's thinking in a way that serves you and gives you more power back. A couple other things I like to know as kind of places to start. For many people, probably many of you listening, you've tried to say no, you've tried to set boundaries because you know that strategy could help you, but you have struggled to do that. What I have found, it's not because you don't know how to do it. It's not because you're not smart enough. What happens is unconsciously, we have some beliefs that it's selfish, that we'll be lazy, that we will drop the ball, right? So we have to address those beliefs. And this takes a little bit of time, but here's where you can start. Your brain wants to focus on how it could be quote unquote harmful or negative to say no or set boundaries. That's that negativity bias we talked about. You want to intentionally shift out of that. So instead, ask yourself, how could it be true that me saying no or me setting boundaries will help other people? And I really want you to answer that. Like, really think about it. How, if you were a leader, how would me not checking emails in the evenings actually help my team? Now, your brain's going to say, well, it won't help your team because what if there's an urgent matter, or what if, some funding gets pulled? You can put that part to the side and come back to, how could it help my team? You will be surprised at the answers you'll find, right? Maybe what you'll realize is maybe my team will learn that they can stay off email because I'm modeling it for them. Maybe my team will initiate their own problem solving and become more independent and grow in their ability, right? There's so many different things that you might think of when you ask that question. The last tip I have, it's a little bit more of a tactical tip, but I want to explain why I recommend it. I highly recommend you start scheduling your rest, not only in your calendar, but put it on your calendar first before anything else. Now, what's going to happen is you're going to put on your calendar and then your brain's going to want to move it, right? It's going to say, oh, we don't have time for anything else. Let's delete that. Or it's going to come time to go to yoga or take lunch. Your brain's going to go, no, let's put that off. Okay. This is why I want you to schedule it in, because I actually want you to see in real time how your brain is creating reasons to not follow through on the rest. And they feel real, right? They feel like facts. They aren't. You have a choice to follow through or not. So this tip is both kind of a tactical thing, but it's really more about seeing the ways in which your brain is denying you rest. And then once you see that, you can really work on shifting your brain's thinking around rest and the importance of rest and prioritizing rest and what that looks like. But first, you have to just realize where your brain is stopping you from getting rest in the first place. So that's where I would start for folks. The other thing, once you do that, we are currently, and I think at the time this podcast will air, offering a totally free, publicly available video series called From Panic to Purpose. It's 10 parts. We release new videos every single Friday, and it goes a lot deeper than what we've talked about here. We have whole videos on understanding the neuroscience of your brain, how it creates anxiety, how it creates panic, and what to do about it, how to regain control, how to navigate the politics of public health, how to reduce your negative thinking and your negative thought spirals, how to feel better, right? Everything we've talked about today, we dive a lot deeper in that series. Anyone's welcome to sign up and join. And when you sign up, you'll get access to all the existing videos that are available and emails with any new ones that are released. So that's where I'd start. And I would join the From Panic to Purpose series to dive deeper and continue learning.
Well, check out that link below for that Panic to Purpose series to definitely learn more and gain some skills that are going to be essential, not only now, but for the entire rest of your career. But really appreciate you sharing those tips. I think I was like nodding along saying, oh yeah, I've definitely done that before, or like how can I like reframe and shift things, because the I can't or I have to, that powerlessness really does run rampant in a lot of like societal conversations and narratives. And I think it's so important that we are able to shift that and have conversations on that. And definitely love the tactic of just putting things in your calendar. I think too often we think calendars are for just work stuff, but we don't put time for play. We don't put time for rest. We don't put time to focus on social health, spiritual health, all the things. So I think like taking that step, and like I've also been very, very like when you say it, you put it in your calendar, and then in your brain you're making up a reason to say, oh, I can't do this today, or I can't do that today. And like, yeah, those things are real, not just for you, but for myself as well. So I appreciate you sharing that, and maybe I'll have to join that series as well.
Yeah, you're welcome. And listen, the only reason I know all this stuff is it happens to me too, right? I coach myself all the time. So I'm not perfect. I'm not like a special snowflake by any means. All of the things you're all doing, we're talking about, like I've done too.
And I know that you wanted to speak a little bit about the trickle down effects of burnout, and really like a message maybe to leaders in public health, and how they model and show up and work really can trickle down, whether they have these burnout tendencies can trickle down to their employees and people that they work with.
Yeah, so it's really interesting, right? A lot of organizations and leaders reach out to me about, well, what policy should we put in place, or what system should we change to like prevent burnout or help people with burnout? And there certainly are policies you can put in place and systems you can change and all of that. But the number one thing I tell anyone who asks me that, anytime I'm consulting for a company, is the number one thing you can do is actually teach these skills of managing your mind, managing your emotions, the tools to prevent your own burnout, to overcome challenges, to leaders. Because you got to think about it like this. What creates the systems, the structures, and the norms in our workplaces? Individuals, right? That's what a norm is just the majority of individuals' behaviors or beliefs or patterns. So if we want to change the norms, the more we change the individual's experiences, beliefs, decisions, the more the norm changes. And when we do that with leaders, there's such an important trickle down effect. So I'll have all the time, I'll be working with a leader who says, well, I tell my team to not work on vacation, right? And if they are sending me on vacation, I tell them not to. But I work on vacation because, I need to, because it will burden them if I don't. And one thing I often point out to them is that your team members know that, right? You have to walk the talk. Otherwise, your team is not going to follow suit, because they're going to be scared to, because you're not setting the example. You're not really promoting what you're saying they can do. So there's almost a distrust immediately there. The more that leaders take on this work and understand this work and become a model of this work, not only can they help their team do it, but just by being a model themselves, their team are going to naturally feel more comfortable to stay off email, to say no, to take their lunch, because they know their leaders doing it. And then that trickles down to their team and their colleagues, and it ends up changing the culture and the norms within the workplace themselves. It's such an, especially in public health, we think so much systems level and upstream and population prevention, which I understand, right? That we almost sometimes forget what creates a norm in the first place, and actually the impact of making changes individually when it becomes a collective change, because so many people have changed, has on norms and culture. Sometimes I think in public health, we forget that piece.
Absolutely. So I think it's like so important, not only as professionals, but as leaders to recognize when we are having these types of experiences, and how do we model in a way that is, healthy and doesn't foster burnout, but really fosters environment that is, I don't know, supporting of the whole being, and really allows people to show up as they are. And I think that modeling part is so important.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so switching gears here a little bit, and this is going to be, I guess, a little impromptu. I was asking Marissa if she could help walk me through, because I guess to people that are listening or watching or whatever, you may have realized my Instagram page has, like, I feel like the effort that I've been able to put out on it for the last maybe 9 months has really decreased. I don't know, maybe it is like burnout, but like feelings of overwhelm were happening, and maybe this is burnout, just not like, I just didn't maybe label it that at that point in time. Feelings of overwhelm, having to deal with a breakup, and just all of those things, as well as other commitments, and like my 9 to 5 work commitments, I feel like kind of ramping up as well. All these things kind of like came into play, into the point where I guess I kind of just said, hey, let me just stop Instagram, or like stop it to the extent that I used to. And even to this day, I have like a challenge of being as active and as engaged on Instagram that I have in the past. So I kind of wanted to raise that up to you and see if there are things that I should think about, or tools or things that you would recommend to me.
Okay, let me ask you this. Would you be comfortable with me coaching you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I think for those of you who are listening, you can think about, and I do this when I do public coaching calls where I'm coaching one person and people are watching. We do this a lot. The questions I'm asking and the information we're talking about, just think about, for you as listeners, how does this apply to me? You might not have the same challenge, but I promise you, what comes up, you can find a place in your life where it applies to you. So you mentioned you were feeling overwhelmed. Currently, with not engaging as much on Instagram, is it still overwhelm that is the biggest emotion that comes up, or is it something else?
I feel like Instagram always gave me some sort of anxiety. And I think this stems back from like the pandemic. And when the pandemic happened, I felt like Instagram and being on Instagram gave me anxiety. What allowed me to be on Instagram during like the pandemic to now was the public health millennial, and was like sharing information. Like that made it worth it and not so anxiety inducing. But like personal Instagram, that's something that I've like more recently gotten less anxiety around generally. And it's funny to say as someone that's like on Instagram, but this is like my actual experience.
Okay, so what was it about the public health millennial that made it feel worth it, where maybe you overcame your anxiety? Like, what drove that?
I think just the knowing that like this was something that was outside of myself, that I'm like actively helping people maybe like reaching out and saying, hey, this was helpful, or just different posts resonating with people, and them talking about it made it like more with it. Like it wasn't because I feel like a lot of times social media is more focused on like ourselves, but like my platform was more focused on like how can I help you, and what are the things that I can tell you that can really help and guide you in that like in wherever you are right now. And that made it worthwhile or easier for me to do.
Okay, so it sounds like before and without the public health millennial, the Instagram anxiety came from some form of like, this is more about me, like eyes on me to some extent. I mean, you tell me.
I don't know if it's eyes on me the anxiety came from. I guess also dealt with a breakup in like
Uh-huh. Yeah.
as soon as the pandemic happened, and that person was still on Instagram and actively used it heavily, while I was like, I felt like dealing with a lot emotionally. So I stopped using like my personal Instagram so I wouldn't have to interact or see any of that. And I focused all energy on the public health millennial, if
Okay,
that
but
gives
here's what
clarity.
I want to show you, right? The where you're feeling anxiety, right? It had something to do more with you in the sense of like, okay, I'm navigating Instagram and like this person that we broke up is still on here, right? Like it was a little bit more focused on you in some sense. It sounds like the anxiety reduced and you're able to use Instagram when the focus was on helping other people.
Yes.
And that shifted you out of the anxiety.
Yes.
Okay. And one thing I want to point out for everyone, it's very, very normal. Like if we experience anxiety about something and then we have kind of a bigger challenge or crisis, that anxiety increases. We saw this a lot in COVID, right? If we're feeling a little bit overwhelmed about our workload, COVID hits, overwhelm goes up. We see this right now. We feel a little anxious about what's going to happen in our career. Then changes happen in 2025, the anxiety goes up. So what we see is it's not a new emotion, it's our emotion more intensified. So that's number one, important to know. But number two, what's important for you to see here is that it sounds like what helped you show up is focusing more on helping others. And that helped kind of the anxiety maybe subside or get reduced or not have as big of a say in what you decide to do.
Yes.
Okay. So thinking about that, how could you utilize that information to help you with Instagram now?
I guess just continue to have that outward focus and maybe like one thing that was very helpful for me in the beginning stages of like having Instagram was having days that I posted certain things, and then like to that point just not really being focused on me per se, but like what can I share, what can I help someone with this week or this day, and really having a schedule that kind of helped me plan that out. And I don't do much of that anymore. As well as I feel like just the growth of the public health millennial, there have been other things that kind of take up more time and space. So I've had less brain energy to be able to like devote specifically to Instagram.
Okay, let me ask you this. Have you had less brain energy to devote to thinking? Because you said this question, how can I help? How much are you asking that question of yourself now? How much are you answering that question now?
I feel like I don't do it as much as I used to. I feel like maybe I even procrastinate on stuff, or like I would like have thoughts around something, or like say, oh, this is a great hook for a post that I could write about, and then I might write it down somewhere, but I never move further than that. Like I would prefer right now, if I was to do something like that, I would prefer to just write it out on LinkedIn and post it on LinkedIn, and then I would just kind of like forget about it on Instagram.
Okay, but here's what I want to point out what's coming up, and I think this is so helpful, right? What you're telling me is in the past, what helped you was thinking more about how you can help others and then having dedicated time to help others. And that right now, whether it's logistical reasons or energy reasons, you don't have that capacity to think about that question, answer that question, act on that question. And that seems to be the missing piece here for you.
That does make sense.
I mean, you tell me, does that land? Does that resonate?
Yeah, I think it definitely does, and maybe even in like procrastinating and not sharing things, it's created like this kind of like loop in my head where I maybe I don't know. I don't share something, so I don't feel like it's valuable, and maybe I just need to like put things out there more, more so than like how I used to do in the past. I feel
Okay.
like maybe the mental barriers as well.
This is really important what you're talking about, actually. And this applies to anything. So anyone listening, right? When you tell me if this is off, but my guess is when you think back to when you were spending more time thinking about like, what can I do to help? You had ideas coming up a lot more often. That's my guess.
Absolutely.
Okay. I see you nodding your head. Yeah. Right. Because what's happening is you're directing your brain where to think, right? And our brains are like hunting dogs. It goes after what we tell it to. And when it brings it back, it's so excited, it wants to do it again. So when you're thinking and directing your brain to think more, how can I help people? And you're finding answers, your brain naturally starts continuing to think about that even unprompted. However, the opposite is true too. So if we're not directing our brain thinking about how to help people, then our brain goes the opposite direction. This is not helpful. I'm not doing a good enough job. This wouldn't help people. This is lame. No one's going to like this. I'm not saying you have those thoughts, but
Sometimes, yes.
okay. But so this is part of why it is important to be intentional about how we're directing our brain.
Mhm.
Right? When we understand how our brain works, our brain, if we don't direct it, it just goes and does whatever, it wants to do. But when we're directing it to where do I want to focus, whether it's my focus is how to help people, my focus is to think about how to help my team, my focus is to think about how I can advocate for changes, and you're directing your brain there, then not only do you go there more often, but your brain starts going there without you prompting it. Versus if you're not doing that, your brain is just like, a hound dog without a guide, just like running around in circles chasing its tail, basically.
That
What comes up for you as I describe that?
what comes back to me, I think, is because as you're saying, like public health or like just everything back, like let's take it back maybe like 2 years ago when I maybe like more feeling everything optimized in like Instagram and whatnot. Like anything that I listen to, watch, talk about, like maybe ideas will come and I'll write things down and I'll like create posts about it. And that happens a lot less frequently now. And maybe like to that point, it is I am not thinking about how can this piece of information be used plus my lived experience to kind of share something that can be valuable to someone in public health or someone that's like in a health related type field. And I'm doing that less now, I would say.
Yes. So where I'd recommend starting is going back to that question, how can I help?
Hmm.
And this is really important. It's not like asking that right away. Your brain's going to go back to that place where it's constantly thinking of ideas and constantly being motivated and constantly being excited. However, it's the first step down that path. And the more you ask yourself that question, and at first it's going to take more intentional thinking. It won't be as automatic as it used to be. It might take journaling about it. It might take scheduling time to brainstorm about it. The more you do that, though, the more you will get back to that place where it is kind of, you just have ideas coming left and right and you're motivated to share them and excited to share them. But you almost have to like retrain your brain to live in that space. And that's the same for anyone listening. Essentially, where you focus your mind, the more you focus there, the more your brain's going to stay there. But if you haven't been in that place for a while, you got to like start by just practicing getting into that place, asking the question, sitting down, thinking about it. The more you do that, the more your brain will start to live in that space.
That makes a lot of sense, and like I'm thinking about it maybe like in a cycle, because starting off like posting about public health stuff, you don't really have that brain take in information, share. But then as you get more experience, you're like, oh, like this what they said in this podcast kind of relates to this, or like this sparked this like hook for me to write a post about. And like now it's kind of like maybe in that lull part where it's like down again, and to your point, maybe just time or experiences and whatnot have come in and changed that dynamic, and I just have to be more intentional, maybe set aside time, and as you're saying, journal to be like intentional and specific on like maybe things, journaling specifically on, okay, I've read these amount of articles or listened to these podcasts, how does this relate to public health, how does this relate to helping and supporting people? So maybe just setting aside that time for myself could be a good way to get started on and breaking that cycle for myself.
Yeah. So this is just to explain a little of the neuroscience behind this for you and for everyone else. We have two parts of our brain that make decisions. We have the primitive part of our brain, that is the fight, flight, or freeze brain. That is the survival brain. All that part of our brain cares about is conserving energy, avoiding pain, and seeking pleasure. The other part of our brain we make decisions from is our prefrontal cortex. That's the part of our brain that thinks strategically and can think about complex things and can plan and think about the past and the future. Right? What you're describing of thinking about how do these books I've read apply to people in public health, that's thinking from the prefrontal cortex part of your brain. And once you light that part of your brain up, you get movement, right? But the challenge is our other part of our brain, our primitive brain, wants to conserve energy. It takes some energy to think strategically. That part of our brain wants to avoid pain. In modern day, pain might be posting about a personal experience and someone not liking it. Right? It wants to seek pleasure. In modern day, pleasure is like just holding ourselves back and not putting ourselves out there. So it sounds like kind of what's happened. And listen, this has happened to me in my business a million times, is your brain has kind of shifted to operating from that primitive part of your brain where it's like holding back and not using energy to think strategically and not, putting yourself out there. And that's become more comfortable for your brain.
Mhm.
Getting back to the prefrontal cortex thinking, that strategic thinking, that takes more effort at first. And that's why you have to intentionally direct it. But then once you're there for a while, then you get back to that. You have ideas all the time and you're thinking about it and you're connecting the dots. And when you're on a walk, you have an idea. And when you're reading a post, you're inspired, right? It will be easier to operate from that place. It's almost just shifting from the primitive thinking brain to the prefrontal cortex. That takes the energy. And that's kind of where you're at right now, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just like voicing this and talking with someone is very helpful, because I feel like reflecting on it by yourself, oftentimes maybe you don't make connections um or or able, like, just like the prodding questions from you, I think is helpful in just helping me to think more deeply about the situation in context to everything else.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that stands out most to me is this question of how can I help people?
Mm.
I bet once you start asking that more, that will light you up the more you ask it. That is my guess. The other kind of tip I recommend, not just for you, but for everyone else, because basically what I've described to you is how our brain works. And so much of, if we want to create a different experience, requires us to direct our brain. This also means it's really helpful if we are very specific of what filters come into our brain. So being very specific of who I'm following on social media, who I'm following on LinkedIn, on Instagram, what emails I'm subscribed to, what movies I watch, what news I watch, right? And I'm not talking about burying our head in the sand. I'm talking about, if you want to focus on making an impact, how can you bring in information from other people making an impact that inspires you, rather than just bring in doomsday news that kind of depletes you? Right. So think about, like, what is your goal for listeners? Is your goal to inspire your team? Is your goal to start a side hustle? For you, your goal is to get back to helping people and posting more. What accounts, what emails, what shows, what books, what news would help you be inspired to do that? And what would actually hold you back? And how can you filter those in and out, just to help your brain stay focused where it needs to stay focused?
That sounds like I have a great journal prompt to work on for the next couple days.
Yeah. Yeah. You totally got this, especially for you. You've been there, which means you can go back. It's just that effort of shifting back. You totally can do it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And before we move on to the next question, is there any overall thing that you would say to close off the that experience talking with me there?
No, I'll just contextualize for folks listening, right? Just notice what we did there. Like, yes, I didn't tell Amari what to do necessarily. I wasn't like, okay, here's your problem. Here's the 10-step subscription. I asked a lot of questions, and then I showed him what his brain was doing, because I understand the neuroscience of our brains based on what he wants to achieve. So just notice how that is very, very different than just go on a run, just vent to a colleague. It's just a totally different approach to make the changes that you want to make, understanding your brain and getting an outside perspective that helps you see your brain so you can kind of shift how you interact with your brain. That's really what coaching is. And for so many of you listening, you might have never been exposed to this before. So I wanted to contextualize it a little bit of what basically we did there.
Thank you for sharing that, and be sure to check out that Panic to Purpose series linked below. Moving on to the next question. So this is from a past week guest question. I'm pretty sure I never asked it before, but regardless, it'll be a new answer this time. So the question is, what skills do you think the next generation of public health leaders must develop to be successful?
Okay, I love this question. I think the number one skill is emotional adaptability. And I want to explain what that means here, because I think there's been a lot of talk about emotional intelligence, emotional resilience. I think emotional adaptability is totally different, right? And what I mean by that is the ability to not get stuck in overwhelm, in anxiety, in fear, and panic, and having the skills to adapt and move in and out of different emotions. As humans, it is normal to have both positive and negative emotions. There is no possibility to live a life on planet Earth as a human with only positive emotions. That's impossible. However, what we want to do is learn the skill to adapt and move through emotions so we don't get stuck in overwhelm, so we can move out of it quicker and move back to groundedness and have that flexibility in that and that adaptability. To do that, we have to really understand our emotions, understand what creates them, understand their purpose, where they come from. And when we learn that skill of emotional adaptability, then what we're able to do is overcome any challenge we face, especially as a leader, the difficult decisions we have to make, the people we have to mentor and guide. The reason that's so important is having negative emotions is a natural response to challenges. But when we get stuck in those emotions, it makes it so hard to lead. So I bet we can all think of a leader during COVID who was stuck in overwhelm, who was stuck in anxiety, who was stuck in panic. And what you saw was someone who made rash, impulsive decisions, who that maybe you had to fix later on down the line, who took out their stress on you or other people who were short and reactive, who weren't able to think big picture and future forward and just short term. That's because they didn't have the emotional adaptability to move out of their overwhelm or fear or anxiety because they didn't understand where it was coming from, how it was created, how to get out of it, how to create calm and confidence. When you have that skill, then you can shift into thinking big picture, thinking long term, thinking strategically, not taking your stress out on other people, making thoughtful decisions. Doesn't mean you're perfect, but it means you're a much more effective and responsive leader to the challenges that we face. And listen, what we're seeing in 2025, I know for many folks, this feels like this is unprecedented, but the truth is when you study human history, right, hundreds of years, at every new war, epidemic, political uprising, rebellion, the population thought the world was ending, right? So it is just human nature, human life to have these huge social changes, COVID, what's happening in 2025, and there's going to be more to come. That it's not just now, right? That's just history. That's just human nature. That's just life on Earth. They're not going anywhere. So learning the skill of emotional adaptability will help you lead no matter what's to come in the future within public health, within society, within politics, within the world.
Love that, and plus one to that. Uh, and I feel like emotional adaptability is not something I've heard people speak about enough. So I'm glad that you are sharing that. And I think even to like your last point is like we're in a time of a lot of pain for people, but how do we shift from that pain to that purpose? And you can check out Marissa's series to learn more about that.
Thank you. That was a perfect plug.
You're welcome. So just to give a quick recap, everyone, this was a conversation full of a lot of information. Definitely recommend rewinding and really like taking notes and like using the skills and tools to like, move forward. But burnout is a spectrum. It can show up in many different ways. We need tools and skills to deal with burnout. You have to have a shift of focus on what we have control over, have ownership of what we have control over, and as well as like scheduling rest and play and all the things that are important to us. We must model leadership and don't trickle down too much. Bring out principles to our staff. And whenever you do have a goal, really focus on how do you direct your brain to create the most from that goal. Marissa, this was very, very helpful. I hope that others are able to take a lot of value from this and move forward. As we said, burnout is not only going to be here this year, but it's going to be here for forever. So just really being able to talk about this and give people skills and tools, I think is so important.
Yeah, and I'll just edit. The potential of burnout will be here forever, but you do not have to experience burnout.
Love
the
the
world
edit.
wants you to burn out, but you do not have to.
Love the edit. Love the edit. You do not have to burn out. Not at all. We do not have to burn out. Though this is hard work and we are doing hard work, we don't have to burn out doing this hard work because the systems are going to be there. The work is going to be there. And we just have to make sure that we are there 100% as ourselves as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Marissa, this was joy. Look forward to having you back again. For those, again, Panic to Purpose series is linked below. Be sure to subscribe if you have not as yet. Leave a like, review, share it with a friend. definitely share it with a friend. They will get so much value from this episode. Thank you all for listening. Talk to you all soon.
Bye, everyone.
Peace.